Everyone. Today we're going to talk about 2.3 changes in British policy. So now we already know that the colonists have a feeling of wanting independence, but what exactly did Great Britain do to really cause and encourage this feeling for independence? So today you will be able to evaluate how changes in British policy led us to the Declaration of Independence. So the first part that happened was Great Britain needed to pay for the French and Indian War. They were in debt. And what better way to pay for that than to tax the colonists? So, one of the major taxes was the Stamp Act. And essentially, you had to pay for a stamp to put on all paper documents. So if you wanted to send a letter, if you wanted to buy a newspaper, anything paper, you had to pay a tax for, which obviously angered the colonists. Why were they having to pay for this war that Great Britain got into? Also, here they were paying for a war that they had very little say in. And so one of the famous colonists, Patrick Henry, after the Stamp Act was passed, he was also from Virginia, so important to know. He was from the VA, began to say taxation or no taxation. So taxation without representation, meaning without a say in the government, is tyranny. So essentially saying that the government doesn't have right to tax us if we don't have a say in what's happening in the government. He was also very much known for saying, give me liberty or give me death. So give me freedom or give me death. So this just kind of gives you an idea of how the colonists felt about the taxes and about being taxed for this war. This was not the only act. There was multiple acts during this time period. Another one was the Sugar Act, a tax on the sugar. There were also the Intolerable Acts. So there were multiple acts being passed, multiple taxes being passed, which led Patrick Henry to say these things, but not just Patrick Henry, but a whole group of individuals. So all of these acts together really angered the colonists. And there's actually a group of colonists that came together to form the Sons of Liberty, which means the Sons of Freedom. And they essentially, their goal was to fight against Great Britain and to encourage freedom for the colonies. Now, while all these acts were being passed, it caused a lot of unrest amongst the colonies. So there was a lot of anger, a lot of unrest and tension between the colonists and the British. And there were two very unfortunate events that both happened to take place in Boston that definitely led to the wanting of the independence as well as the Declaration of Independence. The first is going to be the Boston Massacre. This took place in 1770. And what had happened was a British soldiers fired their guns on rioters or protesters, we'll say. So people who were protesting against the British government. 5 people were killed. And these were all colonists that were killed. An important fact about the Boston Massacre was a man by the name of Crispus Attucks was the first one killed. And he was African American. And this is important because when you look at pictures, you will see him in the pictures. Or the paintings, I'm sorry, when you look at the paintings. The second event to take place in Boston was the Boston Tea Party. And the Boston Tea Party was that the colonists, again, were really angry about the tax on tea. So they disguised themselves as Indians. And dumped an entire shipload of tea into the Boston Harbor. And this was, again, a way to protest the tax to show that they were against it. So we had the actions by Great Britain where they were taxing colonists to pay for the French and Indian War. This led to a lot of unrest, especially in Boston. In addition to that, the Boston Massacre took place where the British soldiers were actually fired shots amongst the colonists, and the Boston Tea Party, where the colonists respond to the Tea Act by throwing an entire shipload of tea into the harbor.